Hello and welcome to Geology Concepts. This is the second part of the month of August current affairs, where we will be discussing topics from environment, science and technology and security. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first update on the environment is a report that is released by World Bank that's with a title named The Impact of Climate Change on Education report. Okay, so it highlights that climate change intensifies extreme weather events, and that in turn is disrupting schooling and causing learning losses and dropouts. So let's understand what is the impact of climate change on education, right? If you see, in most of the climate policies, education remains overlooked in most of the climate policies, isn't it? In 2020, education accounted for only 1.3% of the total climate assistance and was mentioned in less than 1 in 3 nationally determined contribution plans of the countries, right? And if you see the impact of climate change is drastically seen in school closures, because between 2005 and 2024 the schools were closed in at least 75% of extreme weather events, which impacted 5 million people or more, and over 99% of children across world are exposed to at least one major climate and environmental hazard in their lifetime. And rising temperatures negatively affect learning outcomes, as you see. And the report states that the increase of 1 degree Celsius in outdoor temperature on extreme days can result in a substantial decline in test score as well. For example, in hottest 10% of Brazilian municipalities, the students lost about 1% of learning per year due to increasing heat exposures. And also, the increasing food insecurity and economic fragility is jeopardizing the school enrollment ratio as well. Up to 170 million people will be at risk of hunger by 2080, as the report suggests, and it is mostly due to climate change, which will affect student learning as well. And the report also claims that the climate change has disproportionately harmed the girl child, as the climate related events have prevented at least 4 million girls in low and lower middle income countries from completing their education. Now, these are the issues, and the World Bank has suggested some of the measures. Let's look at them. So the first measure that the report suggests that the country should invest in early warning system, for example, like the one INA Risk mobile app developed by Indonesia for enhancing the disaster knowledge for students and staffs, right? And also, school infrastructure for climate resilience should be developed. For example, the Green Economy Strategy and Implementation Plan of Kenya just focuses on promoting bioclimatic design and enhancing student comfort during high temperature seasons. And also, ensuring learning continuity in case of climate shocks. For example, the Back to School campaign of Ghana resulted in nearly 100% of re-enrollment after the COVID-19 happened. So these are some of the suggestive measures that the report suggests, and also the impacts of climate change on education that recently published report talks about, right? Next up, there is a new update on climate finance. So Azerbaijan has launched a new climate finance fund, which is Climate Finance Action Fund, which will be launched in United Nations Climate Change Conference COP29 that will be held next year in Azerbaijan, right? COP29 will be held next year in Azerbaijan, Baku. The headquarters of the CFAF fund, or the Climate Finance Action Fund, will be in Baku, Azerbaijan, and the fund will support climate projects in developing countries, and it will help in meeting the next generation of nationally determined contributions to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach, right? And the CFAF fund will be capitalized by receiving contribution from fossil fuel producing countries as well as companies across oil, gas and coal sectors. CFAF will also become operational at the conclusion of the initial fundraising round in the COP29, which will be in the amount of $1 billion, $1 billion US, and when 10 contributing countries will commit as shareholders to the fund, right? So this will come in force from the COP29 after the finalization of COP29, right? Next up, there is another report which is the state of world's mangroves 2024 report that is released by Global Mangrove Alliance on World Mangrove Day, which is observed annually on 26th of July. Okay. Now the highlights of the report suggest that Southeast Asia alone has about 1/3 of all mangroves globally, and Indonesia has highest, that is of around 21% of world's mangroves are in Indonesia, and followed by West and Central Africa. Half of the world's mangrove provinces are considered threatened under the IUCN Red List. Okay, and if you see in the Indian context, mangroves in Lakshadweep archipelago and coast of Tamil Nadu, that is the Pichavaram mangroves, are critically endangered state, and most of the mangroves are at this critically endangered state because of climate change, that is for the sea level rise, increased storm intensity, and also industrial expansion of the industrial shrimp aquaculture in states like Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal and Gujarat. Also, it has been seen that some of these mangrove lands are converted into oil palm plantations and rice cultivation areas, which resulted in 43% of loss between 2000 to 2020. So this is what the State of World's Mangrove report that is released by Global Mangrove Alliance talks about. Next up, there is an update on atmospheric rivers. So there was a question on UPSC CGSE 2023 mains on atmospheric rivers, and since there is a news on atmospheric rivers recently, so questions can be expected from this part of the syllabus as well. And so scientists warn that intensification and increased frequency of atmospheric rivers due to global warming is worsening extreme rainfall events and weather patterns that are currently seen worldwide, right? Now, what are these atmospheric rivers? These are nothing but the long, narrow regions in the atmosphere, in the upper atmosphere, that transport most of the water vapor outside the tropics, right? So you know that in tropics, convection is the major driver of water vapors. So apart from outside the tropics, these atmospheric rivers, which are long, narrow regions of bands, they transfer this moisture from tropics to the pole. Their average, if you see, they are 2000 km long, 500 km wide, and almost 3 km deep in their nature. And these atmospheric rivers are part of a larger system of extratropical cyclones, and they transport both heat and moisture from tropics towards the poles, as I said, and they are typically located within low level of jet streams, right? Low level jet streams, jet streams are nothing but strong winds in lower atmosphere. The largest transport mechanism of fresh water, and they are the largest transport mechanism for fresh water, and they are also responsible for 90% of moisture transfer from the tropics to pole. Okay. Now, although these atmospheric rivers are mostly weak systems, but the some larger and strong atmospheric rivers can create extreme rainfall events and flooding that can lead to mudslides, catastrophic events that you recently seen in the Wayanad in Kerala. So these kind of phenomena can also be triggered by the atmospheric rivers. So climate change and atmospheric river has some relationship. That means when the temperature is increasing, the intensity of rainfall events are also in rise, because the atmosphere's water holding or moisture retention capacity is also increasing. So the scientists have discovered that by 2100, atmospheric rivers are to become more intense, and they will be much more broader and longer in the atmosphere, and it can create both the flood as well as drought like condition by removing the rainfall from the rainfall dependent regions like India, right? Let's since we are talking about India, let's talk a little bit about the impact of the atmospheric rivers on India. So 7 of India's 10 most severe floods in monsoon season between 1985 to 2020 have been associated with atmospheric rivers, and the increased intensity of fog and haze in the Indo-Gangetic plain has been linked to the rising pollution and water vapor, which are causing due to the intensification of these atmospheric rivers over the Indo-Gangetic plains, and also the declining of snow albedo in the Hindu Kush, Karakoram and Himalayan mountain range due to increased rainfall is also attributed to the atmospheric rivers. So these are the updates that you need to know as far as the atmospheric rivers are concerned. Now recently 3 underwater structures in the Indian Ocean have been named by India. The names are Asok Seamount, Chandragupt Ridge and Kalpataru Ridge in the Indian Ocean, which were proposed by India and was approved by the International Hydrographic Organization, and UNESCO's Intergovernmental Oceanic Commission or IOC. So these structures are located along the southwest Indian ridge in the deep Indian Ocean, and they were discovered for the first time by National Center for Polar Ocean Research or NCPOR Goa. Right. So these are the three structures that India has recently named and approved by IOC and IHO. From the update from the Science and Tech, ISRO recently launched a Earth observation satellite EOS-08 using the Small Satellite Launch Vehicle SSLV-D3. Right. So this EOS-8 mission objective are to develop a microsatellite system and also incorporate new technologies that is required for future operational satellites. Right. So there are three main payloads that are there in the EOS-08 mission. The first one is optical infrared payload or EOIR payload, which will take images in mid-wave and long-wave infrared band for disaster monitoring and environmental monitoring particularly. Then GNSS-R payload is there for which will use remote sensing to monitor ocean winds, soil moisture, Himalayan cryosphere, etc. Then another one is SIC UV dosimeter, which will help to monitor the UV iridescence, and it will also help in upcoming Gaganyaan mission or the manned mission, which will help this observation will help the crew module viewport and will also help as an alarm sensor for astronaut safety. Right. And if you see most of the Earth observation satellites that are there in the upper atmosphere, which were launched by ISRO, their main function is to act as early warning systems, environmental impact monitoring, etc. Right. So this is all about the Earth observation satellite 08 mission. Now scientists have spotted the heaviest antimatter nucleus in the particle reactor, that is the particle accelerator relativistic heavy ion collider. Right. So it is also called this heaviest antimatter nucleus is also called anti-hyperhydrogen 4, which is made up of antiproton, 2 antineutrons and anti-hyperon. Now what is an antimatter? Antimatter particles share the same mass as the matter counterparts, but qualities of this antimatter are such that their charges are opposite. Let's take an example. For example, a positively charged positron is an antiparticle to negatively charged electron. So their behavior are mostly same, but their charges are different, right? Now antimatter particles corresponding to electrons, protons and neutrons are called positrons, antiprotons and antineutrons. So matter and antimatter particles are always produced as a pair in our universe, and if they come in contact, they annihilate each other by releasing a lot of energy. So that's why antimatter are rare in the nature to find, right? Now from the security part, India has been successfully test fired its reusable hybrid rocket named RUMI-1. This is of significance because it was developed by a Tamil Nadu based startup called Space Zone India, right, in collaboration with Martin Group, and was launched from Chennai. And it was launched using a mobile launcher, a small satellite and small rocket called RUMI-1, and it contained 3 CubeSats, which are of the size 1 to 10 kg, and 50 picosats, which are of the size 0.1 to 1 kg. Right. Now let's talk about a bit about the features of RUMI. So it's a hybrid rocket engine. That means it will use combination of solid as well as liquid propellants, and it will for which it can improve its efficiency and also the operational cost. The launch angle is adjustable from 0 to 120 degrees, which will allow the control over its trajectory, and also it is electrically triggered parachute system it has, so it is very cost effective and eco-friendly as well, and it is also environmental friendly in its nature. And the if you know that reusable rockets are something that ISRO has been planning to develop recently, the benefits are that has been done because there are a lot of benefits to it. So the benefits like cost saving, because it is 65% cheaper if you build rather than building the new rocket every time you launch, right? Then reduce the space debris as well. It reduces the space debris, and also it increases the launch frequencies. So the turnaround time is less in reusable vehicles. So more frequent launches can be done by using reusable rockets. So that's all about the Rumi 1 mission. Now lastly, let's talk about some of the exercises that are there in the news. The first one is called the Tarang Shakti, which is India's first multinational air exercise hosted by Indian Air Force in Sulur Airways, Tamil Nadu, right? And Indian Air Force has announced that it will conduct this Tarang Shakti event biennially from now on, right? Then another one is called Udara Shakti, which is a joint exercise between India and Malaysia. Parbat Prahar is the exercise in Ladakh that is currently carried out by Army for high altitude warfare and operations to counter the Chinese influence, right? Then Mitra Shakti is there, which is an annual military exercise between India and Sri Lanka. Exercise Conquest is there, which is a multi-national military exercise. Currently it is in its 21st edition and will be conducted in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. And another thing is Maritime Partnership exercise was recently held in Russia, and India's naval ship Tabar participated in this Maritime Partnership exercise between India and Russia. So that's all about the current affairs for the month of August, which is the second part of the month of August. I hope you have found something useful from this video, and I'll come up with next videos for the month of September. Until then, keep revising and keep studying. So